What's going on? It's the Polygon Don, and today I want to talk about 5 underrated games on the PS4 from my collection that I think way more people should be playing and talking about. Now, the criteria for this list is for the games to not necessarily just be underrated in a critical sense. Some were just underappreciated and most were massively underplayed. Either way, I feel like they all deserve way more attention than they got, so I'm going to give them some love here today. Let's dive in.
Yeah, it's been a rough road lately. But that's the thing about the Rangers. It doesn't matter how hard it gets or how many of them fall. They keep on fighting. The Rangers never stop fighting.
Next up we have Wasteland 3, which is an isometric turn-based strategy RPG with a huge emphasis on player choice. I can't overstate that last point enough, as you'll be making tough decisions constantly. Set in the frozen wastelands of post-apocalyptic Colorado, you'll take control of 2 members from the Arizona Rangers, who survived after their unit was ambushed while on a mission. The 2 survivors are subsequently forced to work with the local ruler known as the Patriarch in order to earn his support for the Arizona Rangers. Once arrived and settled, you are given a base of operations and are tasked with hunting down and reining in the Patriarch's 3 heirs, all of which have gone AWOL and have begun fighting each other in order to determine who gets to succeed him. On top of this, you'll also be fighting on his behalf to preserve his rule over the many settlements and scattered populations that make up this game's version of Colorado. However, some revelations occur that will require you to make a choice, and depending on what that choice is will determine the outcome of the game. Like with many instances in Wasteland 3, your decisions, whether in conversation or combat, have far-reaching consequences to not only the story's development, but also the world itself, and is a massive part of this game's appeal. Not everything is cut and dry, good or bad and black and white, etc. The characters in this game are complex, human and surprising. The world Wasteland 3 is set in is harsh, and the well-crafted scripts the characters and NPCs follow reflect that, with some being cutthroat and brutal and others being maniacally funny. This game also does an excellent job of keeping things fresh. Just when you think you have the world and its inhabitants sussed, the game will throw a curveball at you and knock you straight off your high horse. It also has a really well designed and intuitive UI. This does feel like a PC mouse and keyboard type game, and sometimes ports of those titles to consoles can suffer in the UI department, but this is easily one of the best that I personally have ever experienced. It didn't feel like it held me back in any way, and to be honest, when in the thick of things I barely noticed it, which is probably the best endorsement I could give. Being the sole decision maker in the game, having to make choices during every single conversation pretty much, gave me the feeling that I had complete control of the narrative. I personally think many RPGs strive for that level of player involvement but rarely achieve it. Wasteland 3 does it with ease. Everyone you encounter is so fleshed out and well realised, and finding and recruiting members for your new base also dramatically impacts the game. Depending on who you choose, you could have characters that liven up the place, or a bunch of miserable mercs that cause an atmosphere thicker than the sheets of ice covering Colorado. You'll also get access to a tanky vehicle which allows you to cross the vast wasteland as you make your way from mission to mission. Again, how you get there is up to you, and there are many things vying for your attention along the way. This is definitely one of those games where the journey is just as important as the destination, as you are explicitly involved throughout. You can level up the skills of your party members during your playthrough that make combat exploration and bargaining easier, and the best thing is that all members of your party can benefit from a particular skill, providing the person with the skill is included in the party. No need for everyone to have the lockpicking skill maxed out, for example. Essentially what you want is a mixed bag of skilled Wastelanders that can give you better odds of getting out of tricky situations. The biggest comparison would be XCOM with its similar cover-based strategy RPG elements, but for me the story and player agency that Wasteland 3 provides elevates it way beyond what I experienced with XCOM. Wasteland 3 is incredibly addictive to play, and the writing is so compelling that on multiple occasions during my play sessions the hours just disappeared, and I regularly found that the sun rising was my reminder that maybe it was time to put the controller down. Definitely don't skip this one if you like deep story beats that you genuinely feel a part of, or are into your turn-based strategy games. This is 100% not one to miss.
I'll sharpen my knife on your bones, and I'll wash it clean in your blood. For the deluge is coming, you heathen, and I'm its harbinger. And it all begins here, you little prairie dog. What I do to you, the Dorsey's gonna do to all of Colorado. So squeal all you want. No one's coming to save you.
PS4 exclusive Sakura Wars is a game that melds a few disparate genres into something completely unique and addictive to play. Flipping between third-person mech combat, dating sim and visual novel, it's a crazy mix and to be honest probably not going to be for everyone, but if you are even remotely partial to the odd anime or manga, this is definitely something that you'll want to check out as it's absolutely fantastic in my opinion. The game is set during a fictionalized version of 1940s Japan where the World Luxury Operatic Federation, or WLOF, fights against those that threaten peace around the world, mainly demons and monsters. The WLOF consists of several international divisions, with each major global city having its own team of mech-wearing combat specialists known as combat reviews. When they are not in action defending the Earth from any threat imaginable, they're preparing for the Combat Review World Games, a tournament held every 2 years that pits all the international divisions against one another to see who comes out on top. You'll be playing as Seijiro Kamiyama, a former Japanese naval commander that has been assigned to the role of captain of the new Imperial Combat Review's Flower Division in Tokyo. The HQ is based in Tokyo Imperial Theatre and headed by Commander Sumeri Kanzaki. The Tokyo Division consists of 5 female fighters. They're also actors, but we'll get onto that in a bit. Sakura, Hatsuho, Anastasia, Clarice and Azami. And to be honest, their combat track record thus far has been less than stellar. With the threat of the division's closure due to lackluster battlefield performances, Commander Sumeri tasked Seijiro with not only preparing the review to be a major player on the world stage again, but also to win the Combat Review World Games, this time being held on their home turf of Tokyo. As well as being fierce mech warriors, the ladies of the Flower Division are also actors, performing shows at their base of operations in the Imperial Theatre. This acts as a sort of marketing vehicle for the division, as when they aren't saving the world in their Mugans or mechs, the public can go and watch them perform and buy merchandise of their favourite members. And as captain, you'll not only be making decisions to improve the fighting capabilities of the group, you'll also be acting as the theatre director to ensure each show is a sellout. As I said previously, the gameplay is a mixed bag of visual novel, dating sim and third-person mech combat. When not in your mechs, you'll be exploring the town around your base, speaking with NPCs and triggering quests, etc. When encountering your 5 team members, you'll have the opportunity to raise your affinity or trust level with them, depending on what options you choose when in conversation. More often than not, this will come with a time limit, so you'll need to think fast, but it's worth doing as the results also directly relate to their effectiveness in battle. Raise their trust high enough and you'll trigger a tete-a-tete encounter with them. These are opportunities that really allow you to get close to a member of your team, both figuratively and literally, and this is where the dating sim element kicks in. In these instances, the team member's face literally fills the screen in this incredibly intimate and melodramatic way, providing you with a cursor to select certain areas of her face or body to compliment or comment on. It's ludicrous really, but very funny, and just beware if you happen to live with a bunch of people who open doors without knocking, as trying to explain these tete-a-tete sequences will be painful and embarrassing for all involved. Then there's the combat. As Kamiyama, you will go into combat with usually 1 or 2 members of your team to defeat the foes presented to you. This happens in a wave-like format, bearing some resemblance to the Dynasty Warrior games. Attacks are assigned to the face buttons and they're combo-based. You'll be pressing circle and triangle a lot, and to be honest, was a little too button mashy for my liking. It didn't make it inherently bad, but it did lack a certain depth that I've become accustomed to in action games from this generation. Your mechs also have the ability to jump and dash, and when triggered just before an enemy lands a hit on you, dashes can slow down time, providing you with a window to inflict massive damage uninterrupted. This, when mastered, can be fully exploited by the way, and can make some battles almost trivial. You can also switch between party members on the fly, granting you their abilities mid-battle. Switch to Clarice, for example, to gain that upper hand over flying enemies with her ranged attacks, or switch to Hatsuho to clear out an army of minions with her giant hammer. The combat sections were fun overall, but pretty mindless, and for me at least a little too much on the easy side. Another thing I wanted to mention is that the game is presented with a fully Japanese dub with accompanying English subs, and while that doesn't ever usually bother me, it can present a slight problem when in the battle segments, as reading subtitles while your eyes are busy looking at all the action can be quite difficult, resulting in whole dialogue sections being missed. Thankfully, this occurrence isn't a frequent one, but it is worth mentioning as it can be a deal breaker for some not to have the inclusion of an English VO. But with the combat sections taking a back seat to the dating sim and visual novel aspects of the game, I thought going in that ratio might be a bit off for me. Having now played it, I can assure you the battle segments are the weakest areas of the game. The dating sim and the visual novel sections is where it's at, and as the writing is just that good. The story itself isn't really anything revelatory, but the comedy within it was excellent. Purposefully choosing the perviest answer I could whilst in conversations with the team members regularly resulted in hilarious and appropriate responses and kept me addicted to play out the next scene. And that's another thing this game does really well, is its presentation. It has an episodic structure with a next time on trailer at the end of each episode to get you hyped for what's coming next, which also provides the perfect place to stop for an evening, giving it that feeling of like appointment viewing. It really works and looks fantastic, and speaking of looks, the characters were designed by Tite Kubo, a manga artist best known for his work on Bleach. And the game and the characters within it, whether in 3D or in some of the game's 2D anime cutscenes, all look fantastic. I am such a sucker for 2D anime cutscenes in games though, and these do not disappoint. This game totally surprised me in many ways, and I think it deserves way more praise and attention than it got on release. Check out this strange little PS4 exclusive when you next get the chance, it's well worth it.
世界歌劇団大戦の開会を宣言。なんだ一体。我が名はヤシャ。封印の鍵である帝剣を差し出しなさい。さもなくばお前たちは全て滅びるでしょう。私の船が。これは。返答がない場合は世界中の歌劇団本部を一つずつ。あの姿、あの声はまさか。
And next up we have The Sinking City, which is a third-person open-world detective game developed by Frogwares with action and stealth elements that's heavily inspired by the works of cosmic horror icon H.P. Lovecraft. Set in the fictional town of Oakmont, Massachusetts in the 1920s, the story follows war vet and private detective Charles Reed as he searches for clues to the origins of the terrifying visions plaguing him, and in the process quickly becomes embroiled in the city's many mysteries, least of which is the devastating and unrelenting flooding that has besieged the city. Oakmont has a long history with occult practices, and cultists in bloody ritual garb are an unremarkable sight on the streets of Oakmont alongside fishermen, townsfolk, refugees, and members of the upper echelon of society. However, 6 months prior to the events of the game, Oakmont was inundated by a persistent flood of supernatural origin that submerged many of its streets, cutting it off from the mainland. The flood also brought with it something even more devastating than the deluge of murky water, and that was a dark force that instills hysteria and madness in the minds of the terrified citizens, bringing the city to its knees. Our playable, private-eyed protagonist Reed travels to the troubled city from Boston at the invitation of intellectual Johann van der Berg to discover the cause of his terrifying visions. The nightmares have plagued Reed since the disappearance of the ship that he served on, the USS Cyclops. These visions are shared by numerous other people and are reported most frequently in Oakmont. Whilst there, Reed is also hired by Robert Throgmorton, the influential and let's say physically arresting head of one of Oakmont's oldest families, who has also been studying the visions to help uncover the cause of the flood. Made up of several districts which have all been affected by the flood to varying degrees, you'll walk around finding resources like the ever so scarce bullets, which in Oakmont are even used as currency, such as the value of them, and you'll talk to NPCs. You'll also use your own investigative powers to reconstruct crime scenes and identify clues. Manipulating time and space to uncover key sequences of events that occurred, you'll piece them together in the right order to suss out just what went down, using your mind's eye to peer behind the veil of reality. However, this ability is almost like a borrowed power that is a direct result of having these visions, so using them in excess can drastically reduce your sanity. You don't only have a health bar in this game, you have a sanity bar. Utilising your sleuth skills drains that bar, and as does exposure to the game's many grotesque abominations. Even if you physically manage to keep your distance and your health intact, you can quickly use your sanity if you're not careful, and this drastically affects your perception of the surrounding environment, while a complete loss is fatal. Thankfully, sanity slowly regenerates over time when in more stable conditions, and can be remedied even faster with the use of drugs. Just bear that in mind, it can still creep up on you, especially if you find yourself surrounded by otherworldly horrors. You will literally have your mind blown and die. The best elements of The Sinking City for me was the world, its story, and the detective mechanics. The city of Oakmont is just so oppressive. Random streets have been completely flooded, so getting from one side to the other requires the use of a boat, or if you're brave enough, a quick dip. Good luck if you opt for the latter. And unsurprisingly, for a city that's been flooded, everything is very, very wet. But it looks great in game and adds to the uncomfortability and ugliness of the place, as well as the desperation of those that inhabit it that are really, really well voice acted. The open world nature of it felt good to explore, even if you can't access the vast majority of the buildings in the game. There are even some underwater segments that require you to wear one of those old-fashioned brass diving suits, adding claustrophobia to an already panic-inducing segments of the game due to impaired mobility and visibility. The story was captivating and terrifying, thanks in large part to the source material it's based on, which the detective mechanics gelled with nicely to make a really cohesive and memorable experience. If you like your cosmic horror, this is definitely one not to miss. Okay, so next up we have Road Redemption, which I'll admit is a little bit of a wild card. The other games on this list are more commonly agreed upon by those who played them to be good games. It's just that not many people played them, which is why they made it onto this list. This angry little game, however, is more divisive. It's also working with a much smaller budget and I assume a smaller team than the other devs on this list, but man is this game addictive and ludicrously enjoyable to play. For any of you out there that grew up playing Road Rash on the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if you're in the US, this is basically a reimagining of that classic 90s road rage simulator, brought up to date and up to speed for gamers of this century. It also very neatly and rather cleverly weaves in roguelite elements, which I have to admit is the perfect fit for this game. For those unaware, the roguelike moniker is given to a game that resembles the mechanics of an old dungeon crawling game called Rogue, hence roguelike. The mechanics synonymous with the genre are permadeath, i.e. once your character is dead, it's back to the very beginning of the game, no checkpoints or save rooms here, and any buffs, weapons or armour you had is also lost. However, roguelite games are slightly more forgiving in that you can purchase permanent upgrades with the XP accumulated on your run that stay attached to your character no matter what. It's with these permanent upgrades that gradually start making each run more and more manageable. This, coupled with game knowledge and increased skill through repetition, is what will get you through to the later stages. Thankfully, Road Redemption is a roguelite, but it's still no walk in the park. Like with most games in this genre, you will probably be dying a lot in the first few hours, but as you find your feet as a player, your character is also slowly improving, and it's here that the game really starts to shine and open up. You start the game by picking a vehicle and a driver, both having multiple to choose from and unlock as you progress, that each come with differing stats and their own strengths and weaknesses. The story, if you can call it that, has you chasing down a high-valued bounty across the country alongside every other bounty hunter out there vying to get to them before you do. You'll be cracking heads with bats, spades and clubs amongst other things, decapitating people with swords, once you've removed their helmets of course, which doesn't make much sense as you don't have a helmet around your neck, but never mind, moving on. You can also attach sticky bombs directly onto vehicles and timing it right can clear a whole cluster of bounty hunters in your way. And there's also pipe bombs, which are fun little presents to drop off for people snapping at your heels. And there's lots more weapons too, like stun guns and automatic machine guns, but to be honest I wasn't a massive fan of the guns in the game. Maybe I just wasn't great at using them, but I found it really tricky to steer my bike and aim my gun all at the same time. Thankfully you don't have to be very good at them, as just beating them to a bloody pulp with a metal pipe worked just fine. The tracks, weapons and pickups are all randomised and procedurally generated each time you start a run. This not only keeps you on your toes, it also ensures fatigue doesn't rear its ugly head as you grind for XP. Speaking of XP, as mentioned earlier, you spend this on permanent upgrades like increased health, armour and attack damage, etc. But you can also spend it on unlocking new bikes and even unlocking a later level start, so that you're not always starting each run at the very beginning. You can start at stage 3 or stage 6 for example. It does feel low budget and there is some jank present, but as a massive fan of Road Rash back in the day, I've always wondered why we never got more from that series or even a spiritual successor. Then I discovered this little beauty and for the most part it fills that void and delivers on all fronts. There's not a great deal of gameplay diversity and the story is pretty much non-existent, but the arcade nature of it and the gradual progression through its roguelite mechanics kept me coming back to it day after day. I love having a few games like this in my library, stupid mindless fun to dip in and out of while playing something more serious. It's great and I really think you should check it out if you haven't already. And last up we have F.I.S.T, or Forged in Shadow Torch, which is a 2D side-scrolling action platformer with a heavy emphasis on exploration. Or to give it a more snappier genre title, it's a Metroidvania basically, and man is it a good one. You'll play as Rayton, an anthropomorphic reclusive rabbit and one-time resistance fighter who comes out of hiding to help a friend bust out of jail. Rayton quickly gets back into the swing of things, reclaiming his mechanical fist, and starts his journey to bring the pain to all that stand in his way. Charming and innovative, Torch City itself is absolutely gorgeous looking, with its background, midground and foreground all oozing with detail in a heavy stylized diesel punk world. This fantastical game world is so well crafted, the immersion is memorable and pretty much instantaneous. Discovering new abilities as the game progresses allows you to venture into previously inaccessible areas and unlock shortcuts. These key moments are really well paced and placed. The level designers should get a massive pat on the back here, as it basically means that each moment of this 12 to 15 hour game always has something new and exciting for you to do. Combat is surprisingly deep, it's based on a combo system and will pretty much require you to master it if you want to see what the whole game has to offer. Each of the game's main weapons come with their own mini skill tree that you unlock moves for as you progress. There's the Fist, the Drill, which is my personal fave, and the Whip. And the Fist is an excellent up close and personal melee weapon with devastating power and the ability to grapple and throw enemies. The Drill is more effective in the mid-range and can damage multiple enemies at once, whereas the Whip has a longer range that builds up in intensity with every hit that lands, and switching between them on the fly makes for very frenetic combat scenarios that aren't afraid of asking a lot of the player. They all have special or signature moves too, and the animations for them are just brilliant. Plus, shout out to the audio team, as the sound design really adds to the metal grinding nature of it all. Boss fights are also a heavy feature of the game, and while they're challenging, they never felt cheap. Understanding their attack patterns and learning how to counter them effectively are key to besting them. These moments easily provide the most challenge for the player, but they're exhilarating to beat, and depending on your platforming skills, you might even find them easier than the precision jumping sections of the game. Thankfully, there are numerous checkpoints throughout the map that also serve as a healing station and a way for you to upgrade or level up your gear, so there's no marathon sprint to the boss you keep dying to. Puzzling and platforming your way through a variety of interconnecting levels in a generously sized map, hunting and destroying an ever-increasing list of enemies from the totalitarian regime in control of the city, and seeking out more deadlier weapons to attach to your mechanical arm are the essentials of what make up the gameplay in this incredible game. The fantastic twisting story, addictive combat system and stunning animation are what elevate it to the next level. Seriously, this game is so good to look at in all its main areas, like the neon lit alleyways of Torch City, the claustrophobic tunnels underneath it, to the vast snow-covered mountains above it. Environmental puzzles blocking paths intersect between fighting scenarios to provide moments of calm and break up the gameplay nicely, as do the precision platforming sections. The developers Thai Games have done an incredible job of making all the areas on the map feel unique yet connected to a larger world, but most importantly they made it incredibly fun to explore them. If you haven't already, go and play this game, and if you can, get the physical copy. I originally bought mine from PlayAsia a few years back now, which I believe was Chinese release with English subs only. It's still in the cellophane wrap, so don't quote me on that. But more recently we got a physical release over here in PAL territories that includes a full English voiceover dub, a bunch of extra physical goodies, and a pretty tasty looking steelbook. Plenty of bang for your buck.
Damn. I will not let this power fall into the wrong hands. Especially not yours. Traitor! I'll never let the Legion have the spark!
And there you have it, people. 5 underrated games for the PS4 that I think deserved a lot more praise and attention than they got on release. I'd love to hear what underrated games you think deserved a little more love, so let me know down in the comments. Also, if you're new to the channel and like what you see, have a think about leaving a like or hitting the subscribe button if you want to see more PlayStation related content. That'll wrap things up here though, so as always guys, take care, be good and game on.